It's something we all depend on, right? Agriculture is the foundation of our whole society, but it's often completely overlooked. There's a complete lack of connection about where that food actually comes from and how it's grown and who's growing it. Less than 1% of the population is actually producing food. And so 99% of the
Wow.
population has no real need to interact with farming or where their food comes from. It's been happening for a long time, but it's become very exaggerated now with dire consequences.
Impossible Futures is an invitation, a door opening, a chance to not only imagine an alternative future, but assemble it, reconfiguring a connected society with the raw materials of a reimagined internet, autonomous networks. It's a challenge and a prize for developers and founders who roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty with this new tech stack. But it's also an opportunity to bring together people with very different areas of expertise, perhaps in areas that don't always obviously overlap, to see what new ways of thinking and changes to the status quo can come from it. So for all of us, it's a way of getting under the skin of some of the world's seemingly impossible problems. And for those of us exploring and building the future with autonomous networks, it's a chance to dive in and reimagine industries one by one from the ground up and uncover the impossible futures beneath the surface. So I'd like to introduce you to Edmund Sutcliffe, a third-generation regenerative farmer who's made it his mission to not just secure the future of his own farm and those of his peers, but of the very soil to which we're all vitally connected. I'm Jim Collinson with Autonomy. Let's dig in, shall we? So, hi Edmund. It's really great to have you joining us here on Impossible Futures. This is the first time you and I have met, and probably be the first time any of our viewers have seen you in Moving Pixels. Maybe you could introduce yourself and give us a bit of an idea on what led you to be working on what you are today.
Thanks so much, Jim. And yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you. Finally, as I said earlier, about after having watched development over the last 10 years and seeing the information come out, it's nice to be able to actually start talking to the team. So my name is Edmund Sutcliffe, and I am a third-generation farmer on the land here in Hampshire, in England. But my family has been farmers going back hundreds of years. And I've been working on my farm, or at least I've been messing around with cattle since I was sort of 5 years old, and then sort of actively working from about 9. And yeah, just really, really loved being with the cattle, especially trying to solve problems on my family farm. And that's ecological problems, social problems, financial problems, technological problems, temporal problems. You know, it's just an attitude of problem solving and really just looking wherever I can for things which might help. And so that's taken me into some very interesting places, which is where autonomy came from. So I was looking at sort of technological solutions, and that interest in finding solutions to these problems has also led me to help other farmers, because our problems on our family farm are a microcosm and common to all, well, farmers in the UK, and then farmers in Europe, and then farmers all over the world. The same problems are repeated over and over again. They have different feels, different contexts, but it's very similar everywhere you go.
Yeah, I mean, I like many people watching and listening to this care a lot about the future of humanity's relationship with technology and communication and the things that underpin all that. That's the kind of domain we're in. But despite benefiting from it and being sustained by it, and my future being in your hands to some degree, I know very little of the struggles and challenges of agriculture and individual farmers and the supply chains that let it all function. So I would love it if you, as someone who has made it their life's work now, to take us a bit more into the state of that world and what you see as the most pressing issues that occupy your mind, or the most immediate issues that take up your time.
There's really only one problem as far as I can see it, and that is how humans manage their resources. So that doesn't matter if it's an ecological resource, a human resource, a financial resource, a technological resource, data, doesn't matter if it's data or cattle. There's a way that we manage, which is to take the full context into account. And we're driven by kind of simple needs and desires and problems to solve, which lead us to take expedient solutions, which then have unintended consequences. So I could take a technological solution to my farm, which then could have many unintended ecological consequences and social consequences. So being able to manage holistically, appreciating there is really only one ecosystem in the planet, because we have swallows on our farm that come from South Africa. They fly north and then fly south again. Dust from the Sahara fertilizes the Amazon. So our humans' level of ability to impact their environment has reached such a state that we are kind of powerless if we're not managing holistically and managing with everything else in mind. So to delve into that, into some of those problems, some of the ecological problems that we're facing are floods, droughts, soil erosion, loss of soil fertility, loss of biodiversity. And then socially, that's actually, leading to, loss of nutrient density in our food, which is leading to chronic illnesses, societal breakdown because areas are no longer able to provide food. And that's a big thing in the Middle East as well, is that used to be the Garden of Eden. That's the Fertile Crescent. That's where agriculture was created. And yet now it's desert. And that has a lot to do with how we manage the environment. And so then the financial problems are on that and compounding. So especially for UK farmers, if we use UK farmers as a microcosm, we've got the same thing: floods and droughts, soil erosion, loss of soil fertility, loss of nutrient density. And then financially, we're only really supported by subsidies. So like 50% of farmers are not profitable without subsidies, which just means they're not profitable unless the government gives them a handout. And for the people that are actually the basis of a society, it's kind of crazy, right? We can't even make a living. And so, and we also have rising input costs, and they're rising faster than food costs are rising, or prices.
So I was going to say, in some ways, it's like the tragedy of the commons, isn't it? How do you break these things down and tackle them when things might seem so large?
I hope we do end up with some simple problem statements that we can go away with, but I think it's useful to look at the bigger context, and then you can start to drill down into, okay, we can actually address this problem whilst being aware of the bigger whole. Farmers do have to deal with all of these problems, and it's especially the ecological problem, if you like, that it adds another magnitude of complexity to deal with. So a lot of people have the social and the financial, that's most businesses, social and financial aspects. And very few businesses take into account the ecological aspect.
So, I mean, if you were gonna set out to the community and the viewers of this podcast that a problem statement or that challenge, is there one kind of Gordian knot or one impossible problem that you would unpick if you could?
Yeah.
And which one would that be?
Absolutely. So like I said, there's this disconnection from nature, from farming, that now incorporates 99% of the population not having to even be involved or understand it. What I would like to do is like reform that connection. And how you do that, in my view, is by connecting every single product, tracing every single product back to the land that it was grown on. So whether that's a book, tracing it back to the forest that it was grown on, or your food, or your clothes, if you can trace that all the way back to the land and then verify how that land is being managed, whether it is in fact regenerating the land, whether it is in fact improving biodiversity, reducing floods, reducing droughts, reducing soil erosion, increasing soil fertility, increasing soil food nutrient density. If you could track it all the way back to the land and verify that and allow everyone who buys those products to do that, they are then empowered to make a decision about how they want that land to be managed. So there is always the price aspect, but at least then you have the opportunity to impact land, because everyone manages land whether they realize it or not. 100% of people manage land through your purchases, but you have no understanding and I say that personally as well, like this shirt, like I don't know what the land was like where it was bought from. And that's a problem, because I want to regenerate the land with my purchases, but actually to find the farmers that are doing it and to trace it all the way through the supply chain to the products that are actually being produced from that is, I don't think it's impossible, but it's a tricky problem. And even the farmers that are doing really good work are having to sell their products into a commercial market because that supply chain doesn't exist, and they're not rewarded for the work that they're actually doing. They're doing it out of love. They're not doing it for the money. And that's all right, but they should do it. They should be able to do it for the money as well. So that connection, reforming that connection between the people who use the products and eat the products, drink the products, and the farmers that produce them. There are multiple aspects to that. There are multiple hurdles to overcome, but that, in a nutshell, I guess, is what my Gordian knot would be.
Oh, you mentioned a statistic there about how few farmers regenerate their land. Why is that? What's the reason for that? Is it market forces? Is it supply chain? Or commercial pressures?
All of these problems are complex problems, which means they have all these different aspects to them. And so you're never just trying to solve one problem, which is part of the reason why these problems are always getting worse. So let's look at the financial aspect. There are market forces. There's no clear financial reward to regenerating a land. Basically, it's a race to the bottom because the products are undifferentiated for a start. Very difficult when you're dealing with such low margins and you don't have money in the bank. You're this close to failing the whole time, and that is the reality for most farmers. And so you're very wary of trying anything new as well. So socially speaking, it's a big risk. It's a big risk because farming works on such long cycles. So in order to sell a cow for meat, okay, so I've had to breed that cow. 9 months later, same as a human, the calf is born. 2.5 years later, it's ready for sale. So I've got to be thinking 5 years ahead. So it's a big, it's a big ship to steer. You're not nimble, like some farmers are, but mostly you're locked in. And it takes a long time to turn that ship.
And I guess to a degree is that there's cooperation required between farmers, right? There's a community aspect to it as well, but it's also competitive. So how does that work as a dynamic within the market?
Well, interestingly, I mean, it's not that there's sort of a natural competitiveness, but there's not so much competition. A lot of these markets are wholesale markets which are priced internationally, which is another thing. So your wheat price is actually determined by an international traded price of wheat. So it's another financial thing where you're like, this has no real connection to the land, the local context. It's not dependent on the need of the people in the local context. It's dependent on trading, basically,
and hence the race to the bottom, which presumably the bottom line is the impact literally to the soil. Is it then? Is that what's underpinning it?
Because your product is basically undifferentiated. There's no real benefit to increasing the nutrient density of it or improving your soil. Like it's so you have to have a really, really long-term mindset in order to think about those kinds of things. And most farmers are under so much pressure that you can't. There's just no room. There's just no room to have that. You're like, your day is full of work. You've got no moment to just sit back and think, right, what do I want this place to look like in 20 years? Farmers plant trees that they're never going to see harvested. A good timber tree will take 100 years to grow. So that is really the level that you need to be thinking about for good land management. And our politics is run off 5-year cycle. So it's not where you solve the problem. But yeah, so it's like everything's much faster time cycles and iterating, but agriculture has not had time to either catch up or bring everyone back down to earth, quite literally. The chronic disease, the loss of nutrient density, the floods, the droughts, the loss of biodiversity, like it's all becoming more obvious to people.
So if there was a silver bullet, or you had this magic wand to wave, which if we could somehow grant it for you, I would love that. But if there was some way of having that silver bullet that would reconfigure that structure and that relationship with the land, what would that future look like?
The first thing we need is a marketplace which allows that traceability. How you then link that into sort of people's existing systems is another thing. But if we just imagined it was just on autonomy and it was a marketplace where farmers that were verified as regenerating their soil, and when I say regenerating, it means it's getting better every year. It doesn't actually matter where you start. So in order for it to be accessible to all farmers and to bring all farmers up, it needs to be accessible for the absolute worst of the worst. They need to be able to sign up and get a little better every year, And if we think about chemical use, that just needs to get a little bit lower every year, and then everyone can be on board. Then it's talking about improvement. You've got the financial element, so they're becoming price makers rather than price takers. So they're putting up their goods for a price which actually works for them. They're being supported to do so, and values, reconnects customers directly with the farms, is traceable in both directions. Because if you imagine you want to buy a product and you want to see where it came from, okay, great. Or you want to choose a farm and see what products come from that farm.
It's almost like there's a parallel market for nutrient density.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some amazing products, projects, services out there. So I work with the team that does the ecological monitoring. So they're checking that people are regenerating their soil. And there's another team that takes care of training. A lot of people who are doing really great work are actually not even being compensated for it through the ordinary channels. So if you don't have a market for organic produce where you are, then you have to sell it to the conventional market anyway. So putting people together, putting customers and businesses and farmers all together who want to be able to trace all these products and contribute to a regenerative economy is something I'd love to explore.
If there's such a high bar required, you have to have a market to sell into. There isn't the ability for that mechanism to work that you're talking about of even just incremental improvements from a low point, there's no incentive to improve any further, right?
You have to improve such a long way, depending on where you are, that most people don't bother. Whereas that incremental improvement is not rewarded. And so I don't think we should seek perfection. I think we should say, okay, you've reduced your chemical use by 20% this year. Brilliant. Wherever it was before, brilliant. Okay, let's see if we can do that again the next year and the next year. You need to have that level of long-term thinking.
Would really love to know what is it that gets you most excited for the future at the moment?
I think we've never had this level of access to data, to information, and we've never had this level of ability to solve our problems. The technology that we have is just incredible. We now also have the ability to manage our social, financial, and ecological problems holistically. Gives me a lot of hope for the future, because like I said before, it's that managing of our resources, which is what I believe fundamentally is our biggest issue. And most people go through political means. I don't think it's a political solution that will lead to that. I think it's a management problem. Do we do it with the ecological, social, financial aspects in mind, or do we try and frame narrow problems and give narrow solutions? So it gives me a lot of hope, because I see farmers all over the world, in fact, solving these problems through managing holistically. I would love to be able to give farmers the freedom to be profitable without subsidies and government handouts, and be able to make a living and to regenerate their land and to be free. Autonomy, the freedom to make your own choices, essentially. And so that's what I really want for farmers, and that's why autonomy really resonates with me.
Yeah. Well, great. Edmund Sutcliffe, thank you very much for joining us, giving us some seemingly impossible problems to think about and chew on. And we welcome the impossible future of holistic, regenerative farming with autonomy.
Thank you so much, Jim. That's awesome.
Thanks for listening. If you want to take up the challenge of building this vision of what can be, head to impossible-futures.com for all the details. And if you like what you've heard, please do tell your friends directly, or if you must, hit that like button and feed the algorithm until we finish building something better.